Good morning, 8th graders, and welcome to unit number 2, Expressive Color. In this unit, you're going to be creating an abstracted artwork through your application of color, which is going to evoke some kind of emotion to the viewer. So whether you're trying to show something that's happy, that's sad, that's just angry, whatever your emotion is you're trying to invoke, your choice of color will make that clear. So moving forward, we're going to break down the lesson objectives. I know there's a lot here, but to walk you through it, number one, you're going to interpret the tone or emotion of a design based on the selection of media, which are your tools. You're going to be using oil pastels, and the way color is used in the design. So I basically just mentioned that in the slide before, but that's the main focus. You'll be creating a design that evokes the tone or emotion through the use of color. 3, you will effectively use repetition of design elements and principles to create unity in a sequential work of art, comic design, or an illustration. So whatever your illustration is going to be, however you decide to design this artwork, you are going to basically use the elements and principles of design effectively. So there's going to be a lot of planning throughout for this project to make sure that you are able to create a design that does evoke this emotion. 4, you're going to assemble an aesthetically, well, that's a big word, successful design, carefully choosing the appropriate media to achieve an emotion or tone. Aesthetics, that word aesthetically basically means our appreciation of something. So you basically want the design to be pleasing to the viewer through your selection of your tools and then how you're presenting your emotion. 5, you're going to write a self-reflection on the process, which is basically your student or your artist statement, and then you'll constructively participate in a group critique, just like you did for the last unit. Okay, moving forward. Your first vocabulary word is color. Colors, we all know what color is, but the actual breakdown is more scientific. It's what the eye sees when light reflects off an object. If you think of when you have no lights in a room, no light coming through your window, just complete pitch darkness, you're going to see nothing. You're going to see the absence of color. So if you've ever seen the light spectrum go through a prism and you see it fragment all the different colors in the prism, that represents all the visible light right here that's inside the light spectrum. So without light, we can't see color. So when light bounces off a surface, it bounces into our eye and tells us what color we are seeing. All right, so your question is, how can artists use color to make something more important to the viewer? So in these two images with the cat and the tree, the color basically encompasses the entire work, where it's so colorful, so bright, so vibrant that it just demands our attention. It really emphasizes it through the heavy application of color. So the heavy application of color will emphasize the work. It will make it more important. Rhythm. Rhythm is when you repeat the formal elements to make a work seem active or vibrant. And whenever you see the formal elements, we're talking about line, color, value, texture, space, and I'm missing one or two, but so you basically, the focus of this definition is you want something to seem active or vibrant. So when you look at this saxophone player here and you see all these colors look like they're almost coming out of his saxophone, you can almost feel the music, you can almost really get a sense of the music he's playing. Even the girl whose hair is moving over her face, it looks like her hair was just whipped forward, and the different colors and the motions of the line, everything makes that seem rhythmic, like it's actually vibrant and moving. Your question is, how can artists use color to create rhythm? We basically just talked about that in the previous slide, but here's another image where the colors actually, in a way, are representing the rhythm of the music and the beat and the flow of the music. So depending on whether you just use solid, basic geometric shapes, or whether you make a variety of different shapes and motions with your colors, it can create a rhythmic feel, even depending on how you paint it. The slide before, I'm going to go back to the slide before, if I can get this to do that. Where's previous screen? I guess let's go to previous. So even like the artist, they added color by basically doing like an impressionist style where they took their brush and was dabbing the dots of paint on their brush. So whether you use smooth colors, like a blended technique, or you use a more abstracted technique of adding the color dots around that can show rhythm. So basically how you paint the color, how you apply the color. Harmony is the opposite of rhythm. It uses those elements to create a calm and restful appearance. So these two images seem a lot more calm and peaceful, more solid blended colors that don't represent a whole lot of motion. It's just very still and it's silent. So harmony would be the opposite of rhythm. You want to be thinking about whether you want to create a rhythmic artwork or a harmonious one based on your mood you're trying to convey. So how can artists use color to create harmony? Like I basically just said, very smooth, flat application of color with not a whole lot of back and forth contrast to create that rhythm. So just like this picture here. A focal point. A focal point is important in artwork because it's the subject or space that demands the viewer's attention. So both of these artworks have a focal point, the one on the right being this yellow figure down here who's right in the center, and then you have this man on these stilts looking through this telescope who's a little off-center, but these, depending on how you frame your artwork, you can even see the application of color all radiates from this one person. Everything was planned to make you want to look at that space. You would think that for your self-portrait, your focal point will be you, the main subject, the artist, in your self-portrait. So you want to make sure that your background doesn't take away from yourself being the focal point of your project. So how can an artist use a focal point to express a specific mood or meaning? Depending basically on what you want the artist, or I'm sorry, the viewer to focus on in your artwork will help basically accentuate that mood that you're trying to express. So if you want to express happiness and you want the artist to look at a specific part of your artwork that evokes that happiness, then you want to somehow create that as a focal point. This image here of this artist and the light coming through her eye, the focal point's her eyes, so maybe that represents that she's very insightful, that there's a lot more going on inside her and her personality than you can see from the portrait. So that focal point, again, just helps lead the viewer to accurately notice what the artist wants you to notice in regards to their mood and meaning behind the artwork. Moving on. Emotion is a state of mind or mood that's based on circumstances. So our mood can change day by day, moment for moment, depending on what's going on in our lives. So here you have an artist representing some kind of anger or fear, some kind of struggle. Here looks like very sad, where you have the tears coming down. And then we have happy, and then we have maybe very angry, or you have something very passionate. I'm not quite sure what the subject in this artwork is screaming about, but depending on, well, actually we'll wait for the next slide for that, because that's going to be your question. So the question being, how can artists use color to express a specific emotion? If you want something to be happy, you probably choose bright, more vibrant colors like red, yellow, orange. If you want it to be more of a darker feel, you can use darker colors like black, brown, gray. But even so, I mentioned using brighter colors to show happiness. But here you have an artist who used brighter colors, but this gives more of like a solemn, sad feel. So, and then this over here to the right is more tranquil with the way that those colors blend. That kind of harmony in this artwork. So the color doesn't always solely evoke the emotion, but I would be thinking about that as you add it. Because, for example, if you wanted something to be very sad and then you did it all yellow and bright, you might be evoking a different emotion than you're intending. Balance the equal distribution of the elements of design. So when you equally use color, you equally use line throughout the artwork, you equally use shapes. You want to make sure your artwork is well balanced and the whole space is filled with color lines, shapes, subjects. And then how can artists use balance to maintain viewer engagement? Basically, like I said, filling the space, making sure the artist has a sense of movement where they want to look at your entire artwork because you balanced it. Everything kind of interconnects to everything else because the space is so filled and there's a lot to look at for the viewer. That will help maintain their engagement. You have abstract. Abstract is art that's represented unrealistically. Now, your artwork's not, it's abstract, but you want your subject to be represented enough that we can see your subject clearly, but we're just adding color in an abstract way. So actually more like this portrait here, we can tell this is a figure, a human figure, but the color is abstract to represent the emotion behind the work. So you don't want to have it so abstracted that you can barely see what we're looking at. I mean, this looks like a face with eyes, a nose, here's the jawline. But this is probably a more accurate representation of how we're going to create an abstract work for this project. And how can a single abstract work create different understandings to different viewers? So here you have the little figure saying, I see a bunch of musical instruments or an orchestra. Here, this little figure is saying, I see a bunch of cars in an accident on a freeway. So an abstracted work, even though your intended message might be different, depending on a viewer's life experiences or their mood or their state of mind that day, they'll see different things because they've gone through different life experiences, they have different opinions and thoughts. So looking at abstract work can create different understandings based on different people's life experiences. Would be a clear answer. Moving on. Movement is a sense of motion, or it directs the viewer's eye around the entire composition. So you can have physical motion like these two dancers here, or you can have everything kind of interconnect and direct your eye around the entire work so that the viewer wants to look at every aspect of your composition. The question now is, how can artists create a sense of movement using the art elements to keep viewer engagement? Like I said, you want everything to kind of interconnect. You see how everything's kind of pointing to something else. Everything interconnects, especially like the staircase. This is a famous artwork by an artist named M.C. Escher. You can see everything kind of interconnecting. Every space has a purpose. Everything is somehow directing one space to another space so that you see the artwork in its entirety and nothing is left out. That's the end of the slideshow. Please follow the daily overviews carefully and make sure you're following through step by step with the unit so that you have a clear understanding of the project and where you should be each day. All right, guys, I hope this was helpful, and I will see you in class.